Hey guys, tonight we begin with something a little darker. A time of plagues, punishments, and pottage. We're diving into what life was really like during the Middle Ages. Forget the castles and chivalry Hollywood sold you. The truth? You probably wouldn't last a single day. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Congratulations, you've just woken up in the year 1325. The good news? You're alive. The bad news? So are the fleas. Your bed is a half-rotted straw mattress stuffed with bugs and hay that smells like a barn floor, because it was a barn floor 3 months ago. There's no memory foam, no pillows, and definitely no Egyptian cotton sheets. Just a wool blanket that hasn't been washed since last winter, and now weighs roughly as much as a small cow from the accumulated grime. You blink awake as the church bell clangs in the distance. It's the medieval version of an alarm clock, only louder and somehow even less merciful. Your home is a wooden hut with one room, no windows, and a charming open-concept floor plan where your family, livestock, and domestic insects all share the same space. The smell? Oh, it's a fragrant symphony. A subtle blend of stale beer, human sweat, goat, and something you pray isn't mold, but know in your soul probably is. Scented candles haven't been invented, and even if they were, they'd just melt on your dirt floor. You try to stretch, but immediately regret it, because the air is freezing and your joints ache. You're 2 years old, which in medieval terms is roughly middle-aged. Your spine creaks like an old wooden door, and your knees sound like a bag of rocks being shaken by a confused peasant. Getting out of bed is a gamble. The floor is either wet from last night's rain, which leaks through the thatched roof, or crusty from something your neighbor's chicken did. Either way, your bare feet are now part of the ecosystem. Oh, and privacy. What's that? Your entire family, and maybe a random cousin who just never left, are waking up beside you. There's no bedroom, no curtains, no me time. Just communal everything. Welcome to morning in medieval Europe, where you're never truly alone, because parasites, rodents, and 8 other people are always with you. And this is just how your day starts. It only gets worse from here. So, you've managed to crawl out of your medieval haystack of horrors. Congrats. Now, nature calls, and it's not calling politely. It's screaming. Here's the part where you start missing the modern bathroom. There's no toilet, no seat, no toilet paper, no flush, not even a mildly resentful plunger in the corner. In the 14th century, relieving yourself is an adventure, a social experiment, and often a small public event. If you're a peasant, your bathroom is likely a wooden bucket behind the house, which is already full because Uncle Wolfstern had a rough night after eating bad turnips. The smell is biblical. You hold your breath, do your business, and then, here's the kicker, toss it into the street. Yes, the street. You're supposed to shout something like Gare de Lieu before dumping it out the window. That's Old French for watch out below, although frankly, no one ever moves fast enough. Streets in medieval towns are open sewers, a charming river of human waste, animal droppings, and mystery liquids you'd rather not examine. If you're lucky enough to live in a town with public latrines, congratulations. You get to sit shoulder to shoulder with strangers in an outhouse where privacy is a myth and ventilation is a cruel joke. You might make small talk, but try not to breathe too deeply. Toilet paper? Never heard of it. Most people wipe with straw, leaves, rags, moss, or, if they're feeling especially indulgent, a scrap of wool. Sometimes nothing at all, which might explain why handshakes weren't popular yet. And if you're in a castle, surely it's better, right? Well, sort of. You might have a guardrobe, a hole in the wall that drops your waist directly into the moat. Great idea, except that your enemies know this, and yes, attackers sometimes climbed in through the waist chute. Talk about entering through the back door. So whether you're a farmer or a baron, medieval toileting is a humiliation ritual. It's cold, it's public, it's dangerous, and it's never not disgusting. One slip on a wet stone path, and you're face first in humanity's leftovers, and you still haven't brushed your teeth. But we'll get to that next. You survived the toilet. You deserve a reward, right? Maybe a nice breakfast? Something warm, delicious, comforting. Sorry, this is medieval Europe. Nothing is comforting here. Breakfast, if you can call it that, is a grim affair. There are no eggs, Benedict, no coffee machine sputtering awake, and certainly no avocado toast. You sit down or squat near the fire to a wooden bowl of something that looks like it was scraped off a muddy boot. Welcome to your daily ration of pottage. Pottage is a thick, gloopy stew made of whatever you can find. Grains, root vegetables, maybe a few beans if you're lucky. It's been simmering in the same pot for days, sometimes weeks, and new ingredients are just dumped on top of the old ones. It's less of a recipe, and more of an ongoing, edible experiment. On the side, a hunk of bread so hard it could deflect arrows. It's made from coarse rye or barley flour, often bulked up with sawdust, ground up acorns, or other creative ingredients, because wheat is a rich man's fantasy. This loaf is not your friend. You don't slice it. You negotiate with it. What about drinks? You're not sipping orange juice or an oat milk latte. You're drinking beer. Yes, beer. At 6 a.m. Why? Because the water is teeming with parasites and filth. So you start your day with weak ale, low alcohol, high survivability. Kids drink it too. No one's happy about it, but at least it won't kill you. Immediately. Want some meat or cheese? Dream on. That's for Sundays and saints' feast days, and only if your lord is feeling generous. Most peasants don't eat meat more than a few times a year. As for fresh fruit, only when it's in season, and not already fermented into wine. And don't even think about spices unless you're royalty. A pinch of pepper costs more than your monthly wages. Salt is valuable enough to be locked away. So you chew your gritty bread, gulp your medieval beer, and try not to think about the rat that may have nibbled your porridge in the night. Breakfast doesn't energize you. It just happens to you. And now that you're properly underfed, it's time to work like your life depends on it. Because it absolutely does. So, you've eaten your sad medieval breakfast, and now it's time to get dressed. Not that it'll help. Your wardrobe consists of exactly one outfit. 1. It's a rough wool tunic or linen shift that you've worn every day for months, possibly years. There's no such thing as seasonal fashion. There's just, wear this until it disintegrates or gives you a fungal infection. Underwear? Optional. If you're lucky, maybe a linen undertunic. If you're not, well, you're going commando under layers of scratchy, sweaty wool, all lovingly stitched together by someone who probably had no idea what a seam was supposed to look like. There's also no washing machine, no soap, and absolutely no dry cleaner in sight. So your clothes are stained, stiff, and scented, like a compost pile that's been left to marinate in a pigsty. Even if you wanted to wash them, it's not easy. You'd have to haul water from a river or, well, heat it over a fire, scrub your tunic on a board with ashes or lye, and hang it in the sun, which is out approximately 3 days a year. And don't get me started on shoes. If you own any, they're made of untreated leather, barely stitched together, and offer as much arch support as a banana peel. Most peasants just go barefoot, through mud, through dung, through medieval landmines, aka sharp rocks and disease puddles. All this means one thing: your skin hates you. You itch constantly. Fleas, lice, and bed bugs live rent-free on your body. Everyone has them. Nobles, lousy, monks, itchy, children, walking insect farms. No one escapes. You'll be scratching your armpit with a wooden spoon while chatting with the local priest, and no one will even bat an eye. Your skin is raw from rubbing, your scalp a battlefield of bites, and if you develop a rash, well, too bad. There's no dermatologist, no hydrocortisone, no one to tell you it's probably scabies. You just keep on suffering. And if you're lucky enough to not get an infection, great. That rash will simply accompany you for the next 6 months, like an unwanted medieval sidekick. Now that you're dressed in misery and wrapped in discomfort, it's time to head outside and start working yourself to death. Now that you're fully dressed in itches and damp wool, it's time to flash that morning smile. Except you don't. Because in the Middle Ages, smiling is a dangerous game. Not emotionally, dentally. There's no toothbrush, no toothpaste, no mouthwash, no floss. The concept of oral hygiene is about as popular as bathing, which is to say, not very. Some people might chew on a twig or rinse with wine or vinegar, but for the most part, your teeth are on their own, and they're not doing well. By the time you hit your mid-20s, your smile looks like something pulled from a haunted crypt. Cavities are rampant, gums are swollen, and those aren't just food stains on your teeth, that's decay. You have more rot in your mouth than a medieval root cellar. Sugar, while not yet everywhere, is becoming more common among the rich, imported at great cost, mostly used in small cakes or to show off wealth. If you're a noble, congratulations. You get to rot your teeth faster than the peasants. If you're poor, you'll do it slowly over time with fermented bread, gritty porridge, and years of hard chewing. Toothaches? Get used to them. They're like medieval weather, always there in the background. The kind of pain that makes you consider praying, drinking, or pulling the tooth out yourself with a pair of pliers. And that's not a joke. That was the actual treatment. Dentists didn't really exist, but barber surgeons did. Yes, the same guy who cuts your hair is also pulling your molars out by candlelight with an iron hook and zero anesthesia. Infected tooth? Hope you like fevers, because without antibiotics it can easily turn into sepsis and kill you. From a toothache. That's right, the same thing that sends us to a pharmacy today could be your funeral in the 1300s. And there's no relief on the social front either. Kissing? Good luck. Halitosis, bad breath, is everywhere. If you're single, you're not judged by your smile. You're judged by your land and your livestock. In short, your mouth is a battlefield, and it's losing the war. Now that your teeth are throbbing, let's head outside. Because your real job, the one that will break your back, is just getting started. Time to head to work. Except there's no office, no desk, no coffee break, and no chance of promotion. Your job, if you're like 90% of the population, is simple. Don't die while laboring for someone else's comfort. You're a peasant. Congratulations. That means you work the land that belongs to a lord who probably doesn't remember your name. You rise with the sun and stop only when it disappears behind the trees. Your tools? A wooden hoe, a rusty sickle, and whatever bones are still intact in your body. There's no weekend. There's no clocking out. There's only sunrise to sunset, 6 days a week. Sunday is off, but only if you're not harvesting, fighting off raiders, or praying feverishly for your infected toe to stop turning black. The work is brutal. Fields are plowed by hand or with oxen, if you're rich enough to afford one. You dig ditches, sow seeds, pull weeds, and carry water until your spine begins to resemble the letter S. No one cares if you're tired. No one's asking how your mental health is doing. If you're a woman, surprise. You don't just do field work. You also care for children, clean, cook, spin wool, feed animals, and pretend your husband's lice infestation isn't slowly migrating to your side of the bed. Children? They start helping out around age 5. No school, no toys, just a tiny wooden rake, and a dream of one day not dying of the flu. And if you are one of the few who isn't a farmer, maybe you're a blacksmith, a tanner, or a cooper. Great. You still work with fire, chemicals, or animal guts all day in poorly ventilated sheds. The pay? Basically, survival. The perks? Occasional bleeding. Break a bone? Too bad. Get a fever, drink some warm beer, and keep going. You can't afford to stop, not even for a day, because if you don't work, you don't eat. And if you don't eat, well, medieval Europe has a solution for that. It's called being replaced. So you grip your shovel, ignore the blisters, and keep digging. Because in the Middle Ages, your job isn't a career. It's a slow-motion endurance test. Now that your back is on fire from laboring in the fields, let's talk about the weather. Because in the Middle Ages, temperature is less about seasons and more about ongoing punishment from the sky. Let's start with winter. There's no insulation, no central heating, and no weatherproofing. Just wooden walls with gaps you could throw a chicken through. Your windows? Covered with cloth, not glass. The fire in the hearth? Nice in theory, but you don't have enough firewood to keep it going because wood is expensive, and gathering it from the forest is sometimes illegal. Yes, you can be executed for picking up the wrong stick from the wrong forest. You bundle up in your one damp wool tunic, huddle near the dying embers, and still wake up with your nose frozen. Your feet? Permanently cold, often damp. Your fingers? So stiff they feel like tiny medieval popsicles. Frostbite isn't diagnosed, it's just called bad luck. Now fast forward to summer. Sounds better, right? Wrong. In summer, your home turns into a clay oven. There's no fan, no cross breeze, and absolutely no deodorant. You sweat through your layers, but you can't remove them because showing too much skin is scandalous and also invites sunburn, insect bites, and social judgment. The flies are out in full force, attracted to your unwashed body, and the smell of last week's goat stew that's still fermenting in the corner. Mosquitoes buzz by your ear while you sleep, assuming you can sleep through the sound of your neighbors yelling and babies crying. In the fields, the sun bakes you. No sunblock, no hat, unless you've fashioned one out of straw like a desperate scarecrow. And the worst part? You still have to work. Heat stroke is just called taking a bad turn. So you're either shivering in your own hovel, wondering if your toes will make it to spring, or you're sweating through your only pair of socks while your thighs chafe into oblivion. And the one thing that never changes, no matter the season, your clothes still itch, your food is still terrible, and your next job, still waiting. Welcome to climate control, medieval style. There is none. Feeling thirsty? Need to freshen up? Want to splash a little water on your face to wake up from this damp fever dream of a life? Too bad. In medieval times, water isn't your friend. It's trying to murder you quietly. Let's start with drinking. The nearby stream looks fresh, bubbling and clear, like something out of a fantasy movie. But spoiler alert, it's not. Upstream, someone just dumped a chamber pot into it. And if not that, then a dead pig is probably decomposing in it. Parasites, bacteria, and the entire microbial army of medieval Europe are waiting in every sip. That's why people drank beer. Yes, beer. Even children. But before you imagine medieval kids doing keg stands, understand that it was small beer, weak in alcohol, strong in survival. Brewing boiled the water, so it was safer than whatever flowed through the town ditch. Wine was another option. If you were rich enough to afford it, and unconcerned with functioning properly before noon. What about bathing? Surely water was used for cleaning. In theory, yes. In practice, absolutely not. See, back then, people believed bathing actually opened your pores and let the disease in. That's right. Washing yourself was considered medically risky. You were cleaner, apparently, if you never removed the protective layer of filth caked onto your skin. Communal bathhouses did exist, but they quickly gained reputations as places for gossip, scandal, and sometimes full-on medieval extracurriculars. So naturally, the church got involved and shut many down. Even if you did want to bathe, it was a full production. You'd need to fetch water from the well, boil it over a fire, fill a wooden tub that leaked, and then pray no one else in the house used it before you, or worse, after. And rainwater? Collected in open barrels where birds poop, insects breed, and moss thrives. Sounds refreshing, doesn't it? So whether it's going in your mouth, on your body, or onto your crops, water in the Middle Ages is less of a life source and more of a gamble. One wrong gulp, and you're spending your final days sweating in a straw bed, clutching your stomach, and contemplating all your life choices. Next time you sip tap water, raise a glass for our ancestors. They didn't have the luxury of hydration without hazard. So, you drank the water. Or maybe you didn't. Maybe you just stubbed your toe on a rock shaped like disappointment. Either way, you're sick. You need help. You need a doctor. Too bad you live in the Middle Ages, where medicine is really just polite torture with a theology degree. Let's start with the diagnosis. Everything wrong with you, whether it's a cough, rash, broken bone, or the creeping plague, is caused by your humors being out of balance. The four humors were blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. According to medieval science, your health depends on keeping them balanced, like some sort of internal soup. Got a fever? Too much blood. The answer? Bloodletting. That's right. Let's drain your life force into a bowl using a dull blade or a hungry leech. And yes, barbers were often the ones doing it. Imagine getting a haircut and a hemoglobin extraction in one sitting. 2 for 1, baby. Feeling sad or anxious. That's clearly an excess of black bile. The cure? Laxatives. Maybe a warm herbal purge. Or just prayers and a cold compress while everyone avoids eye contact with you and starts carving your coffin. Now, if you break a bone or get a nasty wound, you're in real trouble. There's no anesthesia, unless you count passing out from pain. Surgery is done with knives that haven't been cleaned since the Crusades. Tools are heated over fire, not for sterilization, but because they just look scarier that way. Antibiotics? Centuries away. Germ theory? Not invented yet. They think disease comes from bad air or God being annoyed with your moral failings. Got a stomachache? Must have been your sinful thoughts. Hope you like confessing while vomiting. If your condition gets worse, you'll be treated with more leeches, possibly some crushed beetles, and a priest at your bedside giving last rites just in case. At this point, they're preparing for the cure known as death, and if by some miracle you recover, everyone just assumes God took pity on you. The doctor takes full credit, and the leech gets promoted. So yes, in the Middle Ages, medicine is less about healing and more about surviving the cure. After a long day of labor, lice and leeches, it's finally time to eat. You shuffle back to your hovel, stomach growling, ready for the one joy left in life. A warm meal. Bad news. Your meal is probably trying to kill you. Let's begin with the basics. Food preservation doesn't really exist. There's no fridge, no freezer, just salt, smoke, or the hope that winter air keeps things fresh. Your meat, if you're lucky enough to have any, has been hanging for days, covered in flies, marinated in questionable brine, and possibly shared with a rat or two. Bread is the cornerstone of the medieval diet. But even that isn't safe. In bad harvest years, desperate peasants bulk it up with bark, sawdust, or even clay to make it stretch. And if it's rye season, there's a bonus. Ergot, a fungus that causes convulsions, hallucinations, and sometimes death. It's like eating bread laced with LSD and tetanus. Vegetables, only if they're in season. And you know what's always in season? Turnips. So, many turnips. Boiled, mashed, or floating in pottage, which, if you remember from Chapter 3, is basically a hot swamp of mystery ingredients that's been simmering since your great-grandfather's funeral. Fruit might be available in the fall, but it rots quickly. And sugar is rare, expensive, and hoarded by the rich to show off their blackened teeth. Dairy is another gamble. Fresh milk spoils in hours. Butter and cheese fare better. But they're loaded with bacteria. People eat them anyway because, frankly, it's either that or chew your boot leather. And let's talk about seasoning. Spices like pepper, cinnamon, or nutmeg. Worth more than gold. For the average peasant, flavor comes from onions, salt if you're lucky, and pain. Most meals taste like wet burlap, sprinkled with sadness. But food isn't just a health hazard, it's a political one. Game animals belong to the Lord, not you. Caught poaching a rabbit? You could be fined, imprisoned, or even executed. That's right, your dinner could get you hanged. So as you sit down to eat your gray stew by flickering firelight, remember, every bite is a risk. But you eat anyway. Because in the Middle Ages, food doesn't nourish. It tests you. It's evening now. You've worked, suffered, and barely digested your suspicious stew. You might think the day is winding down, but don't get too relaxed. Because God is watching. So is the priest. And so is your neighbor Agnes, who will absolutely rat you out if you miss Mass. In medieval Europe, religion isn't just part of life. It is life. The church controls your calendar, your laws, your education. If you can read, your birth, marriage, death, and everything in between. Think of it as your spiritual landlord, and you're always behind on rent. Every day is structured around prayer bells. The town church bell rings in the morning, noon, and night, not because people need reminders, but because missing prayer is a sin. Forget to bow? Sin. Eat meat on a Friday? Sin. Think about your neighbor's wife in that one dream? Double sin. And yes, hell is very real. Vividly real. Priests describe it in glorious detail. Rivers of fire. Lakes of boiling blood. Demons with pitchforks. And eternal wailing. If the plague doesn't scare you, eternal damnation definitely will. You can't read the Bible yourself because it's written in Latin. A language reserved for monks, clergy, and that one noble kid who's too good for dirt. You rely on the church to interpret everything for you. That means if the priest says your crop failure is because you didn't pray hard enough, well, time to kneel harder. Tithes, a tenth of everything you own, are mandatory. If you grow wheat, you give wheat. If you raise chickens, you give eggs. If you have nothing, congratulations. You're spiritually bankrupt, and financially doomed. Holidays? They're holy days, dozens of them. And while they offer breaks from labor, they're not for fun. They're for attending Mass, fasting, confessing sins, and reminding yourself that joy is a dangerous indulgence. Questioning the church is dangerous. Heretics are burned, witches are drowned, blasphemers are flogged, and skeptics are quickly reformed. So you go through the motions. You chant, you bow, you pray that your soul, after enduring this dirt-covered life, might finally land in paradise, assuming the priest likes you. Because in the Middle Ages, God may be merciful. But the church? Not so much. If you thought being a medieval peasant was rough, try doing it as a woman. All the filth, famine, and fear, plus childbirth, subservience, and social invisibility. In the Middle Ages, being a woman is like being on hard mode, with no health potions and no restart button. From birth, a girl's life path is pretty much locked in. Marry young, bear children, serve your husband, die tired. Education? Not likely, unless you're from a noble family and sent to a convent. Your intellectual development stops around the time you learn how to churn butter and patch a tunic. Marriage happens early, really early. It's not weird to be betrothed at 12 and pregnant by 14. It's not about love. It's about land, livestock, and alliances. Your opinion? Not required. Once married, you're basically your husband's property. Your job is to produce heirs, feed everyone, keep the house running, and not complain. Because complaining might get you branded a nag, or worse, a witch. That label comes with a complimentary drowning or burning, depending on local fashion. Childbirth is a death lottery. There's no prenatal care, no sterile tools, no anesthesia. Midwives do their best. But even minor complications can mean death for the mother, the child, or both. Some women survive 10 pregnancies. Many don't survive 2. But don't worry. Once the baby is out, your work increases. Now you have a screaming infant in a lice-ridden hut, and you're expected to nurse, cook, clean, and still help in the fields. You don't get a break. You are the break. For everyone else. If you're unmarried, you're suspicious. If you're widowed, vulnerable. If you're outspoken, dangerous. Women who didn't conform were often accused of witchcraft, especially if they had herbal knowledge, a strong personality, or just looked at someone funny on a rainy Tuesday. Even in the church, your role is limited. Nuns lived under strict rules. No speaking without permission. No freedom of movement. And your spiritual worth? Always ranked below men. In short, if you're a woman in the Middle Ages, you're expected to endure, obey, reproduce, and suffer in silence. Ideally, while smiling. Because even in a time of universal suffering, women were somehow expected to suffer gracefully. So far, you've battled filth, starvation, social injustice, and possibly a goat. But just when you think your day can't get any worse, here comes violence. Loud, bloody, and often completely acceptable by medieval standards. Let's be clear, the Middle Ages were not peaceful. The idea of law and order mostly meant hope the local lord isn't in a bad mood. Violence is everywhere. In the home, in the streets, on the battlefield, in church disputes, and sometimes in line at the communal bread oven. Crime is common, punishment is brutal, and justice is more performance art than protection. Steal a loaf of bread, you could lose a hand. Accused of lying, your tongue might get pierced. Gossip too much? Meet the scold's bridle, a metal mask strapped to your head with a bar in your mouth. For correction, of course. Let's say you're accused of something serious. Heresy, theft, Witchcraft. How do you prove your innocence? By being tortured, obviously. Welcome to trial by ordeal. One version, you stick your hand in boiling water to retrieve a stone. If it heals without infection in 3 days, you're innocent. If not, you're guilty. Another option, you're tossed into a river. If you sink, you're innocent and probably dead. If you float, you're guilty and will be punished anyway. It's like a medieval game show where the prize is survival and the host is actively rooting against you. And if you're sentenced to death, that's a public event. Executions are performed in front of cheering crowds. Hangings, beheadings, burnings. Sometimes people bring snacks. It's the medieval equivalent of cable TV. Domestic violence? Completely normal. Husbands were allowed, even expected, to discipline their wives and children. Street fights? Commonplace. You could be beaten just for looking the wrong way at a noble's horse. And war? Always simmering. Local feuds, territorial disputes, religious crusades. Someone's always marching off to stab someone else in the name of honor, God, or boredom. Violence isn't a breakdown of society in the Middle Ages. It is society. Everyone lives with the constant knowledge that life is fragile, justice is arbitrary, and your neighbor might bash your head in over a pig. So walk carefully, keep your eyes down, and never trust anyone with a club. At this point, you've made it through the lice, the leeches, the laundryless misery, and the looming threat of public disembowelment. But now comes the final chapter of most medieval lives, an early and unglamorous death. If you're alive and still breathing past the age of 40, you're practically a celebrity. You might even be referred to as the Old One, which is less of a nickname and more of a statistical miracle. Let's break it down. The average life expectancy hovers around 30-40 years, but that number is dragged down heavily by infant mortality. Nearly half of all children died before reaching age 5. Disease, malnutrition, or one bad winter was all it took. No vaccines, no antibiotics, no hope. If you survived childhood, you entered adulthood already exhausted. Work began as soon as you could walk upright, and by 20, your joints creaked like a monastery door. You might be missing several teeth, a finger, and most of your original optimism. Women faced a particularly deadly gauntlet: childbirth. It was one of the leading causes of death for medieval women. No pain relief, no medical intervention, just prayer, hot water, and someone holding your hand while you bled out on a straw-stuffed cot. For men, the dangers were different, but equally relentless. Farming accidents, infections from minor wounds, a neighbor's drunken rage, a crusade gone sideways. Even walking to the market could be risky if you crossed paths with a bored bandit or an angry tax collector. Death could also come quietly, from the plague, which turned cities into cemeteries overnight, or from famine, which could last entire seasons, thinning out entire villages, or from bad luck, like eating spoiled grain and spending your final hours hallucinating and screaming at the walls. And funerals? You were lucky if you got one. Bodies were often buried quickly to avoid disease. No embalming, no polished coffins, just a hole, a few murmured prayers, and a shallow mound of earth, if there was enough space left in the churchyard. So yes, in medieval times, life was brutal, short, and constantly under siege by death in all its casual forms. You didn't retire. You just stopped showing up. And speaking of exits, let's move on to your final chapter. The medieval dream dies. So, how's your day been? You've woken up in filth, relieved yourself into a bucket, brushed your teeth with wishful thinking, nearly passed out from hunger, worked until your spine cried for mercy, scratched your way through itchy wool, prayed to not get plague, and barely dodged a public execution for owning a squirrel. Welcome to a single day in medieval Europe. Still dreaming of becoming a knight? Think again. That romanticized version of the Middle Ages, gallant swordsmen, noble ladies in towers, heroic battles and feasts in candlelit great halls. It's a myth polished by fairy tales and fantasy books. In truth, the medieval world was gritty, cruel, and deeply unfair. Hierarchy was everything. If you were born poor, you stayed poor. If you were born rich, congratulations. You had a better chance of surviving, but you were still one bad soup away from dysentery and a hasty burial. Even the nobles weren't immune to misery. Castles were drafty stone refrigerators filled with fleas, smoke, and politically motivated marriages. Sure, you had a fur cloak and a goblet of wine, but also a 50% chance of dying in a skirmish or from an infected splinter. Not exactly luxury. The simpler times weren't simple. They were relentless. Everything took longer. Everything hurt more. Everything from childbirth to chewing came with consequences. Life was survival, not leisure. And if you did find a quiet moment to think, to dream, to imagine something better, there wasn't much you could do with it. No upward mobility, no modern medicine, no internet to Google. What's this weird rash? You lived, suffered, worked, and died within a 10-mile radius of where you were born. But here's the wildest part. Through all of this, people still laughed, sang songs, told stories, fell in love, and found meaning. Not because life was easy, but because humans are stubborn like that. Even in the darkest chapters, they made space for light. So tonight, when you slip into your clean bed with indoor plumbing, antibiotics, and central heating, maybe say a quiet thank you to the modern world, and to your ancestors who fought rats, famine, and feudalism, so you wouldn't have to. Long before she was Catherine the Great, Empress of all Russia, mistress of reform, and icon of ambition, she was simply Sophie. Born Sophie Friederike Auguste von Anhalt-Zerbst in 1729, she was the daughter of a relatively obscure German princely family. Her tiny duchy in Pomerania offered little in terms of power. But Sophie herself, she had something no title could provide: razor-sharp intelligence, relentless charm, and a quiet, burning hunger for greatness. Her upbringing was strict. Her mother Johanna was cold and calculating, not a warm, nurturing figure, but a social climber obsessed with status. Sophie's father, a Prussian officer, was more distant than disciplinary. From a young age, Sophie learned to walk the fine line between obedience and cunning. She read voraciously, spoke multiple languages, and learned how to observe a room before speaking in it. Skills that would soon become survival tools in one of Europe's most brutal courts. When the Russian Empress, Elizabeth Petrovna, began searching for a wife for her heir, Grand Duke Peter, she looked beyond Russia's borders. Peter himself was of German descent, and Empress Elizabeth believed a foreign bride, pliable and grateful, would be easier to control. Sophie fit the bill perfectly. Noble blood, Lutheran faith, which she'd be forced to abandon, and a reputation for both grace and humility. At just 14 years old, Sophie was summoned to Russia. She arrived in the freezing capital of St. Petersburg in 1744, wearing thin German fabrics and a diplomatic smile. Her mother pushed her forward like a chess piece. Sophie, however, had her own game in mind: To become acceptable in Russian society, she converted to Orthodoxy, taking the name Ekaterina Alexeyevna, Catherine. The ceremony was public, symbolic, and life-altering. She wasn't just changing religions, she was burning the bridge behind her, stepping into a foreign empire with no way back. No one watching that quiet teenage girl in a fur-trimmed coat could have predicted what would come next. Betrayal, revolution, enlightenment, and empire. But from the moment Sophie stepped foot in the Russian court, she stopped being a pawn and began planning how to become a queen. Catherine's marriage to Grand Duke Peter was meant to secure her place in Russian royalty, but from the very beginning, it felt more like a cage than a crown. Peter, heir to the Russian throne, was not the dashing prince of fairy tales. Awkward, immature, and obsessed with toy soldiers, he was far more interested in playing war games in his chambers than governing an empire or showing affection to his new wife. Some accounts even suggest he refused to consummate the marriage for years. He idolized Frederick the Great of Prussia and resented the Russian court that had adopted him. In contrast, Catherine embraced Russia with a fierce determination. She learned the language, studied its history, and memorized Orthodox rituals. She wanted to belong. Peter wanted to escape. This mismatch wasn't just emotional, it was political. The Russian court was a viper's nest of gossip, paranoia, and brutal power games. Empress Elizabeth still ruled with absolute authority, but her health was in decline. Everyone knew a transition was coming, and everyone had an agenda. Catherine was watched constantly. Her letters were read, her friendships monitored, and her every move scrutinized. She couldn't trust her husband, her mother, who was still whispering in her ear on behalf of foreign interests, or even her servants. In this world, alliances could turn into accusations overnight. But Catherine was no fool. She learned to play the court's games quietly, cultivating allies in the shadows. She charmed military officers, made friends with scholars, and developed a reputation for dignity and restraint, a stark contrast to her husband's childish tantrums and open contempt for Russian traditions. Behind closed doors, Catherine began reading Enlightenment thinkers like Voltaire and Montesquieu. While others saw her as a young consort, she was building a vision, not just for herself, but for Russia, a nation of strength, education, and reason. But there was one problem. The longer Peter lived, the longer Catherine remained in limbo, a powerless wife to a man unfit to rule. So she waited, observed, and planned. She knew the Russian throne wouldn't be inherited. It would have to be taken. In 1762, after nearly 2 decades of waiting, watching, and quietly maneuvering, Catherine saw her moment and seized it with breathtaking precision. Empress Elizabeth had died, and Peter, now Peter III, was finally Tsar. But his reign began unraveling almost immediately. In just a few short months, Peter alienated the church, offended the nobility, insulted the army, and lavished praise on Prussia, Russia's longtime enemy. He reversed key policies, humiliated the clergy, and talked openly about divorcing Catherine to marry his mistress. The court, already wary of his erratic behavior, turned cold. The army, filled with generals loyal to Catherine, grumbled in corridors. Even ordinary Russians, devout and patriotic, saw Peter as a foreign puppet who mocked their traditions. Catherine, watching all of this unfold, made her move. In July of that same year, while Peter was away at his summer palace, Catherine launched a bloodless coup d'etat. Supported by key military officers, including her lover Grigory Orlov and his influential brothers. She rode through St. Petersburg in full regalia, was proclaimed Empress Catherine II, and won the allegiance of the powerful imperial guard. Peter, caught off guard and without allies, surrendered within days. He was taken into custody and shortly after found dead under mysterious circumstances. Officially, it was reported as a hemorrhoidal colic. Unofficially, it was murder. Catherine was now empress, not through lineage, not through union, but through determination, intelligence, and boldness. It was unlike anything before. A woman from abroad, lacking any rightful claim, ascended to the Russian throne without engaging in a single conflict. However, her true challenge was only starting. She needed to turn that daring pursuit of authority into an enduring legacy. Would Russia welcome her? Would the aristocracy hold her in esteem? Could she maintain the empire's unity without succumbing to the same destiny as her husband? Catherine recognized that power acquired through cunning could vanish just as swiftly. She sought to lead not through cunning, but with foresight. Thus commenced her evolution from a meticulous schemer to a progressive ruler. A person who seeks to reshape boundaries, welcome the ideals of the Enlightenment, and transform the understanding of female authority. Once Catherine obtained the crown, she had the option to relax in her authority. However, she chose not to. She envisioned a purpose far grander than just occupying a throne. Her ambition was to reshape Russia, focusing not only on military and political aspects, but also on its intellectual landscape. Peter admired Frederick the Great and toy soldiers, while Catherine looked up to Voltaire, Diderot, and the daring intellectuals of the Enlightenment. She had faith in logic, advancement, learning, and the idea of a monarch serving the populace, despite her own exercise of complete power. Catherine didn't merely read Enlightenment philosophy, she embodied it. For more than 15 years, she engaged in direct correspondence with Voltaire, complimenting him while upholding her autocratic stance. She welcomed Diderot to her court and went so far as to buy his entire library to provide him with financial support. In private, she immersed herself in legal documents, engaged in discussions about reforms, and developed strategies to bring the empire into the modern age. During the initial phase of her rule, she focused on the task of formalizing Russian legal codes. In 1767, she established the Legislative Commission, a bold initiative aimed at overhauling the complete legal framework of Russia. Catherine's own Nekas served as a political manifesto cleverly concealed. A discourse on fairness under the law, the perils of torture, and the duty of leaders to prioritize the welfare of the people. For an empress in 18th century Russia, it was revolutionary. However, the ideals of the Enlightenment had to endure the harsh realities of Russia, a sprawling, feudal, and profoundly conservative territory governed by nobles who preferred their serfs to remain in their subordinate positions. Catherine was aware of this. Although she supported change, she proceeded with caution. She eliminated certain types of torture, broadened access to non-religious education, and established schools and libraries. However, she also reinforced the authority of the nobility over their serfs to ensure their loyalty. This was Catherine's delicate dance, a queen of thought in the public eye, a pragmatic ruler behind closed doors. She balanced the delicate line between lofty ideals and the harsh realities of existence, navigating the elegant salons of Paris and the tough political landscape of Moscow. Her vision for Russia was daring, yet consistently measured. Catherine, in numerous respects, wasn't aiming to transform Russia into a European nation. She aimed to reshape Russia, according to her vision. And that signified change, indeed, but with a firm grip concealed in softness. Catherine sought more than just internal reform for Russia. She aimed to extend it beyond its current limits, crafting an empire that would inspire fear, admiration, and envy. Where Peter the Great had opened a window to the west, Catherine sought to dismantle the barriers. With her at the helm, Russia's borders expanded more than they ever had. She fought battles not merely to protect her throne, but to redefine the landscape of Europe. One of her most notable campaigns was directed at the Ottoman Empire. The conflicts that unfolded in waves during the 1760s and 1770s transcended mere territorial disputes. They were focused on impact. Catherine viewed herself as the champion of Orthodox Christians facing Muslim governance and as the legitimate guardian of Eastern Europe. Under the leadership of generals such as Alexander Suvorov and Grigory Potemkin, Russia seized important territories, including Crimea, the northern Black Sea coast, and access to warm water ports, a long-desired goal of Russian czars throughout the years. These triumphs went beyond mere military success. They held significant symbolic meaning. With every victory, Catherine communicated a powerful message. Russia had shed its image as the remote, underdeveloped relative of Europe. It was a powerful force across the continent. She shifted her eyes toward the west. Catherine engaged in a series of agreements and diplomatic strategies, taking part in the divisions of Poland, slicing up the beleaguered Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth alongside Austria and Prussia. At the conclusion of the Third Partition in 1795, Poland disappeared from the map, with Russia acquiring extensive new territories and millions of additional subjects. Yet Catherine's triumphs extended beyond mere military might. She also filled her mind with ideas. New cities have been constructed. Trade routes saw significant expansion. German settlers were encouraged to develop agricultural land in Russia. The empire transformed into a vibrant mosaic, stretching from the frigid Baltic to the sunlit shores of the Black Sea. Throughout it all, Catherine stood as the pivotal figure, reviewing reports, giving commands, and directly managing the development of her growing empire. Some would label her as someone driven by a thirst for power, even suggesting an imperialistic nature. However, for Catherine, expansion did not equate to ambition. It was fate. She believed that a truly great ruler was defined not only by their ideas, but also by the boundaries they established. She aspired to do more than simply govern Russia. She aimed to transform it into a refined empire, instilling fear in its adversaries, earning respect from its counterparts, and remaining devoted solely to her. Catherine the Great, renowned for her brilliance and power, was equally famous for the intrigues that unfolded behind the palace doors. And no, not everything was shared in hushed tones within the confines of libraries. Catherine's personal life turned into a highly discussed element of her time on the throne. She had a collection of lovers, not merely one or two, but a thoughtfully selected array of them. Often youthful, frequently attractive, and at times wielding political power. She was open about them. Indeed, she frequently granted them titles, estates, and pensions as a reward for their good behavior. If not, they were subtly let go, occasionally accompanied by a courteous thank you and an advancement. One of the most significant of these admirers was Grigory Potemkin, a figure as remarkable as he was daring. Their connection intertwined elements of romance, politics, and collaboration. Certain historians speculate that they might have tied the knot in secrecy. United, they influenced military strategies, colonization efforts, and the evolution of southern Russia. Potemkin was more than a lover. He was, in many respects, her co-ruler. Nevertheless, Europe was unable to overlook the scandal. Rumors circulated. Satirical pamphlets depicted her as passionate, relentless, and even a bit eccentric. Following her passing, the rumors escalated, with the most notorious being the utterly untrue and grotesque story involving a horse propagated by her adversaries to tarnish her legacy. But what is the reason for this fixation? Straightforward. Catherine was a woman who embraced her power without remorse, and in a society where female leaders were often cast as either virtuous saints or sorrowful characters, she boldly rejected those expectations. She existed, cherished, and governed according to her own desires, and that rendered her perilous. Interestingly, despite her critics labeling her as immoral, Catherine held profound philosophical views on love and sexuality. She held the view that enjoyment was an inherent aspect of existence, and that individual connections need not jeopardize societal obligations. She distinguished emotion from governance, an achievement that eluded many male leaders. In truth, her connections were frequently calculated. She chose to be in the company of men who demonstrated loyalty, competence, and political advantage. And when they came to an end, she released them, often with a smile and a gracious farewell. Catherine's romantic pursuits did not undermine her authority. It formed a crucial element of her approach, a combination of fervor and strength that rendered her unforgettable, coveted, and intimidating. Despite her charm and authority, Catherine's rule faced significant dangers. In 1773, that danger manifested as a bearded Cossack known as Yemelyan Pugachev. He was an exceptional rebel. Pugachev asserted that he was none other than Peter III, the deceased husband of Catherine. He claimed to have survived the coup and was now back to take the throne from the German usurper. It was ridiculous. Peter had been absent for quite some time. However, for the downtrodden and weary lower classes in Russia, the assertion didn't have to be accurate. It simply had to provide a sense of hope. Pugachev vowed to bring freedom, abolish serfdom, reduce taxes, and provide land for the ordinary folk. His words ignited a spark throughout the Volga River region, particularly among the Cossack peasants and the Old Believers. In an era where the divide between the aristocracy and the common folk had grown painfully vast, his assurances resonated like a beacon of hope. The Pugachev Rebellion stands out as the most significant peasant uprising in the history of Russia. Towns were captured, strongholds crumbled, nobles were brutally killed. For a chilling instant, it appeared as though the very foundation of the empire could shatter. Catherine felt unsettled. This was not a distant conflict she could conquer with horsemen and agreements. This was an uprising from within. Her own people, rebelling against the authority she governed. However, Catherine remained calm. She took action. She sent in skilled military units to eliminate the uprising, without mercy. Pugachev's forces faced defeat in 1774. He was taken prisoner, exhibited in a metal cage, and ultimately executed in Moscow, a cautionary message to anyone who would venture forth. Subsequently, Catherine reinforced her focus on order and control. Her aspirations of freeing the serfs gradually slipped away into quietude. The uprising revealed to her the boundaries of enlightenment in a nation still bound by feudalism. She increasingly relied on the nobility, who provided loyalty in return for complete dominance over their serfs. This marked a significant change. The Empress, who previously referenced Voltaire, now focused on stability rather than philosophical musings. Reform took a careful approach. Monitoring has intensified. Any hint of rebellion, even if only murmured, was to be crushed before it could take form. Pugachev may have met his demise, yet he bequeathed a caution that lingered ominously for Catherine. The strength founded on disparity could only endure for a limited time before the tempest swept in. As Catherine the Great neared the end of her life, she had governed Russia for more than 30 years, surpassing any other female leader in the nation's history. From the instant she took control, she challenged assumptions, transformed her realm, and reimagined the roles of both a woman and a ruler. During Catherine's rule, Russia emerged as a formidable European force, increasing its territory by more than 200,000 square miles, incorporating Crimea, sections of Poland, and areas along the Black Sea coast. These were not merely military victories. They represented strategic shifts, ensuring access to warm water ports and transforming trade dynamics. Yet her legacy extended far beyond mere maps. Catherine also made a significant cultural impact. She played a pivotal role in establishing the Hermitage Museum, gathered one of the most significant art collections in Europe, and engaged in correspondence with the leading thinkers of the Enlightenment. Her court transformed into a hub of elegance, creativity, and intellectual pursuit. In a nation frequently perceived as underdeveloped by Western Europeans, Catherine established Russia prominently on the cultural landscape. She transformed education by establishing schools for girls and advocating for the publication of books. She brought smallpox inoculation to Russia, even publicly getting vaccinated herself, a remarkable act of scientific courage for her era. However, her rule was marked by contradictions as well. Although she held a deep appreciation for Enlightenment principles, she did not liberate the serfs. She indeed expanded serfdom further into the territories of Russia. Her reforms, though notable, largely followed a top-down approach, aimed at enhancing the empire without genuinely altering its core structures. Nonetheless, Catherine's rule provided a sense of stability and a drive for ambition. She realized that power was not something passed down. It was designed, overseen, and perpetually protected. She governed not through divine entitlement, but through sheer determination, strategic intellect, and unyielding analysis. She was labeled in various ways: a usurper, a tyrant, a reformer, a seductress. Yet, most importantly, she was impactful. Upon her passing in 1796, Russia stood wealthier, larger, and more formidable than it had in centuries. She departed from a steadfast throne, an empire that grew, and a legend destined to last for ages. Catherine went beyond mere rule. She governed with wisdom, cunning, and a fierce command of the past. In that journey, she transcended the role of an empress. She transformed into a legend. Despite her immense power, expansion, and lasting legacy, Catherine the Great remained fundamentally a woman, maneuvering through a male-dominated world, transforming it to reflect her vision. Behind the grand portraits and official proclamations was an individual acutely conscious of the fragility of her standing. She wasn't born Russian. She ascended to the throne via a coup. She governed a realm that resisted having a woman at the helm. And yet, she not only survived, she flourished. Catherine was never satisfied with merely being decorative. She immersed herself in reading, poured her thoughts onto the page, and embraced every opportunity to expand her knowledge. Her daily routine was demanding. Endless hours spent poring over reports, engaging in correspondence with foreign nations, refining state documents, and overseeing a court teeming with competing factions. She refused to be satisfied with merely occupying the throne. She commanded the throne with the poise of someone destined for it. In numerous respects, she felt isolated. She filled her life with courtiers, lovers, and artists, but reflected in her memoirs on the scarcity of those she could genuinely trust. Her son Paul, whom she had reservations about and kept distant from state affairs, matured into a man she dreaded might reverse all her achievements. Her most profound emotional connection with Grigory Potemkin transformed into a lasting friendship. Yet his passing in 1791 left a scar that never fully mended. Catherine meticulously shaped her persona. She grasped the strength of storytelling and utilized it more effectively than many rulers of her time. She presented herself as the mother of Russia, an enlightened ruler, a warrior empress, and a patron of the arts. Yet underneath those roles lay a woman who faced rejection, betrayal, scandal, and rebellion, and continued to persevere. Upon her passing in 1719, she bequeathed an empire that had undergone significant transformation, yet also left lingering questions. Was there more she could have done to abolish serfdom? Did politics compromise her ideals of enlightenment? Was she primarily a reformer or a ruler? She is remembered by a title she never claimed, the Magnificent. It wasn't due to her perfection, her kindness, or her sense of justice. She seized power and exercised it according to her own rules, in an era and setting where women were expected to have none. She didn't merely don the crown, she redefined what it meant to earn one. Deep within the humid Chiapas jungle of southern Mexico, the ruins of Palenque share tales from the ancient Maya civilization. Majestic temples ascend beyond the treetops, their limestone surfaces worn by the passage of time, yet still filled with mysteries. In 1994, one of those secrets came to light. A group of Mexican archaeologists, under the direction of Fanny Lopez Jimenez, was examining Temple Thruend, a relatively unassuming pyramid located adjacent to the more renowned Temple of the Inscriptions, the final resting place of the powerful king, Pakal the Great. Temple Thruend seemed unremarkable at first, but then they spotted something unusual. A concealed secret room located below the building. No había sido tocado por los saqueadores. It was immaculate. As the archaeologists made their way inside, they discovered a stone sarcophagus lying in quiet repose. The atmosphere was thick with the burden of ages. Upon lifting the lid, a cloud of red dust billowed up like smoke. Vivid, striking crimson. The interior was adorned with powdered cinnabar, a toxic mercury sulfide that the Maya used in their ceremonies. And nestled within that crimson cloud was the skeleton of a woman. She was laid to rest with great care and respect. Her bones were delicate yet whole, her skull adorned with a jade mask, and her body encircled by burial gifts. Necklaces, diadems, ear spools, all beautifully crafted from jade and shell. The burial exuded an air of royalty in every detail. Still, there was no name etched, no symbols to mark her presence. It represented one of the most opulent female interments ever discovered in Mesoamerica. And still, it remained a complete mystery. What was the reason for her burial in red powder? Who was she? Could she have been a queen, a priestess, or maybe even the wife of Pakal? The researchers referred to her as the Red Queen, and the name became permanent. Yet, despite the advancements in forensics, they were unable to definitively identify her. She lived around the 7th century, during the Golden Age of Palenque. In contrast to the majority of Maya tombs, hers remained concealed, unspoiled, and intentionally secluded. Her burial transcended mere ceremony. It was a profound spiritual experience. This woman was not destined to be recalled through language. She was destined to be honored through ceremony, through hues, and through the enigma she created. The most chilling aspect of the Red Queen's tomb was neither her jade jewelry nor the stillness of the sealed chamber. The red dust was present, A dense coating of powdered cinnabar enveloped everything. The sarcophagus, the walls, her bones, and the offerings surrounding her. It adhered like blood to stone. For the Maya, this was intentional. Cinnabar, derived from crushed mercury sulfide, held a position as one of the most revered yet perilous materials in ancient times. The vibrant red hue was not only visually captivating, it represented blood, rebirth, and the life force linking the human and divine realms. Red held a sacred significance. It resembled the hue of dawn, of devotion, of existence rising from oblivion. It was not merely a symbol. It held deep spiritual significance. The act of covering the deceased in cinnabar served as a ritual intended to transform the body, preserving it not for eternity, but for the purpose of transition. In Maya belief, death was not the conclusion. It was a transition, an entry into a different cosmic dimension. Thus, the Red Queen, regardless of her identity, was being readied not merely for interment, but for elevation to divine status. However, there's an additional aspect to consider. Cinnabar is harmful. Continuous exposure may result in mercury poisoning, causing tremors, hallucinations, and potentially fatal outcomes. The Maya may not have grasped the science behind it, yet they certainly sensed its power. It was unpredictable, intense, risky. Bathing a corpse in it signified that this individual was far from an ordinary being. In Palenque, only a handful were interred with cinnabar. Pakal the Great, the powerful ruler whose pyramid towers over the site, was one. His body, much like hers, was equally drenched in the red powder. That detail by itself sparked curiosity. Was the Red Queen his spouse, her mother, or a being of similar celestial rank? Her skull rested upon a layer of jaguar skin, an additional sacred emblem. Surrounding her were bone needles, obsidian blades, and tiny jade figurines, suggesting rituals that took place either in her lifetime or in her memory after her passing. Each element of her burial conveyed a narrative without uttering a sound, a narrative of strength shrouded in mystery, a woman ready to journey into the underworld, not quietly, but with ritual, immersed in the hue of offering. Enveloping the Red Queen's blood-soaked remnants was a realm of stillness, interrupted solely by the shimmer of jade, shell, and obsidian. These were more than just decorations. Each item was a carefully selected gift, meant to accompany her on the journey to the Maya afterlife, the Xibalba. Flanking her were jade necklaces, weighty and frigid, their gleaming surfaces remaining luminous, even after 3 centuries buried beneath the earth. Jade was not merely beautiful, it held a sense of reverence. The Maya viewed it as a representation of everlasting existence. It symbolized the lushness of maize, the energy of the jungle, and the essence of the divine. Only the privileged were interred with jade. For the Red Queen, it adorned her chest, wrists, and ears, unmistakably indicating that in life she held power, possibly even a touch of divine grace. The jade funerary mask, gently positioned over her face, stood out as one of the most haunting artifacts. In contrast to the opulent death masks of Egypt, this one was understated, crafted from countless small mosaic tiles, designed to reflect the shape of her skull. The mask held a ceremonial purpose, safeguarding the soul, maintaining identity, and showcasing her as divine in the sight of the gods. Scattered around her remains were bone needles, obsidian blades, and shell artifacts. These may have served as instruments of ritual or emblems of her standing, whether as a priestess, healer, or royal matriarch. A single bone pin bore an engraving, subtle yet intentional. A faint reminder of her voice faded into history. At her feet and around the perimeter of the tomb lay ceramic vessels, still sealed, probably once containing offerings, food, drink, or incense intended to support her spirit in the afterlife. The Maya viewed the afterlife as a perilous journey, complex and fraught with obstacles. These items were essential, not extravagant. The tomb embodies a sense of intimacy, striking a balance that feels purposeful rather than excessive. There was neither gold, nor chariots, nor any display of grandeur, only items selected for their profound spiritual significance. It was a guide for the spirit. These treasures reveal the Maya's perception of death, viewing it not as an end, but as a shift in power. The Red Queen was not laid to rest, to fade from memory. She was being readied for her rise. Despite the magnificence of her tomb, the Red Queen has left an unsettling emptiness in her wake. Her sarcophagus remained unmarked, devoid of any name or inscriptions, while the walls bore no glyphs to reveal her identity. She undoubtedly exuded strength, but who was she? As soon as her tomb was uncovered, researchers started piecing together the clues. What is the most intriguing theory? The Red Queen was Tsakbu Ajau, the spouse of Kinich Janab Pakal, who is recognized today as Pakal the Great, the most renowned leader of Palenque. Tsakbu Ajau transcended the role of merely being Pakal's consort. Born into a noble family, she entered into Palenque's royal dynasty through marriage at a young age. She had at least 3 sons, each of whom held significant status, and she took on an important ceremonial role during her husband's reign. She was truly deserving of such an honor in her final resting place. The tomb's location, mere feet from Pakal's impressive burial in the Temple of the Inscriptions, lends credence to this theory. The closeness indicates a purposeful union, partners for life, sovereigns even in their final rest. And then we have the cinnabar. In Palenque, only 2 burials exhibited such extensive cinnabar coverage: Pakal and the Red Queen. This probably wasn't just a coincidence. However, this is where the intrigue intensifies. DNA tests were performed on both sets of remains to verify the connection. What about the outcomes? Uncertain. The woman's bones did not indicate a direct maternal connection to Pakal, yet this does not eliminate the possibility of a spousal relationship. Ultimately, marriage is not dependent on shared blood. There are those who contend that she might have been Sak Kuk, the formidable mother of Pakal, who governed Palenque prior to his coming of age. Some propose that she could have been a high priestess, a sister, or perhaps a royal ancestor whose name has faded away with the passage of time. Nevertheless, the evidence strongly suggests Tsakbu Ajau, a queen by title, a mother of kings, and a spiritual counterpart to Pakal. The absence of a name might not be a mistake. It could have been deliberate. In Maya cosmology, the essence persisted not via monuments, but through ritual, symbol, and the murmurs of the earth. Thus, the Red Queen lingered in a state caught between myth and reality. A woman who led, her legacy not etched in stone, but draped in crimson and quietude. To grasp the essence of the Red Queen, we need to delve into the world she emerged from, a realm where Maya women, particularly those of royal lineage, wielded more power than is often acknowledged. In the Maya civilization, political matters frequently revolved around family dynamics. Royal women were not just passive partners. They held roles as diplomats, priestesses, and power brokers. They performed ceremonies, supported places of worship, and were vital in upholding harmony, preserving the rightful lineage. Their heritage served as a valuable asset, utilized to create alliances and establish rights to the throne. Consider Sak Kuk, the mother of Pakal the Great. Upon the vacancy of the throne of Palanque, she seized control and governed as queen regent until her son reached maturity. She was not just a temporary solution. She held power in her own capacity, enacting orders and managing building initiatives. Without her, Pakal might not have achieved greatness. She was not an exception. In the Maya world, locations such as Yaxchilan, Naranjo, and Calakmul reveal inscriptions that depict women taking part in significant ceremonies, participating in warfare diplomacy, and at times, ruling directly. They frequently appeared in stelae and murals, adorned in intricate headdresses and regalia, positioned alongside kings as equals, or occasionally elevated above them. Their words were etched in symbols. Their names lingered in memory, but eventually faded away. When the Spanish conquistadors arrived centuries later, much of that memory had faded away. The perspective of colonialism depicted indigenous women as passive entities within a patriarchal society. However, the archaeology reveals an alternative narrative, showcasing intricate gender dynamics where power was a matter of negotiation rather than mere inheritance. This perspective presents the Red Queen in a different way. Although she did not hold the title of ruler, her lavish and sacred burial next to Pakal indicates that she played a crucial role in the royal hierarchy. Her jade mask served as more than mere decoration. It embodied identity and the power that was cherished in life and safeguarded in death. Her lineage might have been the essential bond that unified Palanca's dynasty. In the Maya civilization, a queen held a significance beyond mere titles. She held a revered heritage, served as a voice in rituals, and frequently acted as the connection between deities and humanity. The Red Queen might lack a name, yet in her realm, she was always heard. The Red Queen was not merely interred with riches. She was interred in a structure abundant with meaning, intricately woven with Maya cosmology, ritual symbolism, and deliberate design. Her tomb transcended the notion of a grave. It served as a portal to eternity. Her body was found within Temple Third, one of the smaller pyramids at the center of Palanca, and its closeness to the Temple of the Inscriptions, where Pakal the Great rests, is significant. These temples were constructed with purpose. Their placement was revered, influenced by celestial patterns, legends, and ancestral heritage. Temple the Third stands humbly beside its magnificent counterpart. Yet it conceals something even more personal, a sealed tomb, undisturbed by plunderers, flawlessly maintained. It was built deep inside the temple's heart, reachable only by a steep, narrow staircase. The journey into her tomb carries a sense of symbolism, a ceremonial descent into the depths below. The chamber is bare, constructed from hewn stone, sealed securely for more than 1,000 years. The walls are bare, lacking glyphs or murals, and there are no intricate carvings to narrate her tale. Maybe that silence is purposeful. This was a realm not for the living to decipher, but for the deceased to reshape. At the center, her sarcophagus rests like a sacred altar. Made from limestone, it resonates with the majestic stone sarcophagus of Pakal nearby. The lid of Pakal is renowned for its intricate depictions of cosmic rebirth, whereas the tomb of the Red Queen presents a more understated appearance. The attention turns inward, centering on the body, the cinnabar, and the very essence of the death ritual. Nevertheless, there are nuanced design elements that suggest significance. The tomb is oriented from east to west, reflecting a symbolic journey that parallels the sun's passage from life to death. The room may be compact, yet it holds great strength. It seems intentional, intimate, a cherished space for someone esteemed. Maya temples served as cosmological instruments, connecting the heavens, the earth, and the underworld. To be interred in one was to ascend beyond the mortal plane. The eternal home of the Red Queen was not a mere afterthought. It was a meticulously crafted shrine, a realm where death morphed into transformation. Her bones lie in stone, her essence captured in cinnabar, and her legacy woven into the very architecture. A sanctuary that communicates silently, conveying her significance. For the ancient Maya, death represented not an end, but a threshold. A revered journey into the underworld, referred to as Xibalba. For the Red Queen, this crossing transcended mere spirituality. It embodied political, cosmological, and profoundly ritualistic dimensions. Burial rituals were meticulously planned ceremonies, steeped in legend, designed to navigate the soul through the perilous depths of the underworld. The writings and imagery of the Maya reveal that Xibalba was far from a tranquil afterlife. It was a labyrinth of shadows, flowing rivers of blood, daunting trials, and deities of death. Only individuals who were appropriately interred, ceremonially readied, and spiritually fortified could embark on the journey with success. The Red Queen was interred in cinnabar, encased in stone, and surrounded by offerings, all indicative of a prestigious burial. However, there's additional information. The discovery of bone needles and obsidian blades in her tomb suggests the possibility of auto-sacrifice rituals. These items may symbolize the rites she engaged in during her life, or could have been reenacted at her burial to strengthen her spirit. Her funerary mask, meticulously crafted from jade tiles, served a purpose beyond mere decoration. It might have acted as a sacred container, safeguarding her visage and essence as she ventured into the beyond. In Maya belief, the face reflected the essence of the soul, which required acknowledgement from the gods. The ceramic vessels encircling her might have previously contained chocolate, maize, water, or perhaps pulka, to sustain her in the afterlife. Other items, such as stingray spines or shell trumpets, may have symbolized spiritual tools, calls to the gods, or tokens of ritual communication. Burial was more than just a farewell. A change occurred. The Maya held a belief in cycles, viewing death as a seed, burial as a form of planting, and the afterlife as a process of rebirth. Monarchs were frequently regarded as mortal embodiments of deities, and upon their passing, they reverted to those celestial beginnings. The Red Queen, draped in crimson, sealed within a pyramid, and revered with tributes, was being readied for resurrection, not merely as a human, but as an entity connected to the divine structure of the universe. Her burial marked just the beginning of a new chapter in her story. The legend was just starting to unfold. Located just a few steps from the final resting place of the Red Queen is one of the most iconic tombs in Mesoamerica, that of Kanich Janab Pakal, commonly referred to as Pakal the Great. The burial within the Grand Temple of the Inscriptions is renowned for its artistic expression, grandeur, and profound spiritual significance. What makes the Red Queen's tomb truly remarkable is not just its contents, but the location of its discovery. Her sarcophagus lay concealed within Temple 3, right next to Pakal's monument. In a city such as Palenque, where each temple was meticulously placed to embody cosmic principles, this proximity was certainly not by chance. It was deliberate, a declaration carved in rock. A number of scholars hold the view that the Red Queen was Tzakpu Ajao, the queen and trusted consort of Pakal. Although her tomb has no inscriptions, The similarities in their burials are quite remarkable, both encased in cinnabar, both interred in pyramids, both laid to rest with jade, and both honored with profound respect. These rituals reflect one another, resembling two halves of a sacred story. Pakal's lid is renowned for illustrating his descent into the underworld tree, a celestial tableau of mortality and renewal. The simpler tomb of the Red Queen lacks such iconography, yet the symbolism is found in the pairing itself. If Pakal symbolized the sun, traversing the underworld at night to ascend once more, then the Red Queen might embody the moon, the feminine energy that navigates its own enigmatic course in the heavens. United, they represented a celestial balance, male and female, ruler and sovereign, light and darkness, structure and tradition. In Maya mythology, rulership was not one-dimensional. It was interconnected. Balance was essential for harmony in the cosmos, and this equilibrium so permeated the dynastic court. Positioning the Red Queen next to Pakal signified the preservation of more than a union. It represented a celestial alliance. Their closeness in death might reflect their positions in life, a queen not behind, but alongside her king, sharing not merely a throne, but a legacy. In their resting places, they communicate silently. Two spirits, entwined in rich hues and solid earth, united through the ages, embodying one of the most revered quietude in history. Although her name has faded into history, the Red Queen of Palanque remains, not as a mere artifact of the past, but as one of the most mysterious and formidable figures of the ancient era. Her tomb, sealed for more than 1,200 years, now speaks through the ages, beckoning inquiries that resonate more intensely with each new finding. She embodies an enigma that continues to elude complete comprehension. It's possible we will never truly understand who she was. No inscription marked her identity. No thief recounted her tale. And yet, the attention given to her burial, the abundance of her offerings, the meaning behind her crimson-stained bones, all convey the significance of a woman deeply valued. Not just as a wife or partner, but as an individual who possessed genuine influence, spiritual significance, and noble lineage. Today, the Red Queen compels us to reconsider our beliefs. She serves as a testament that in the ancient Maya world, women had a voice. They conducted ceremonies, ruled over cities, and influenced empires. Although figures like Pakal have historically dominated the narrative, the resurgence of the Red Queen serves as a powerful reminder that authority was not solely in the hands of men. It coursed through mothers, queens, priestesses, and visionaries. Her legacy extends beyond the riches she bequeathed. She initiated a dialogue among archaeologists, historians, artists, and storytellers. Each jade bead, each layer of cinnabar, and every architectural decision in Temple Thethid conveys a purposeful message. This woman was significant, and maybe that's the most remarkable aspect of her tale. It's not about what we understand, but rather what remains unknown to us. The Red Queen shows us that history is more than mere facts. It's an ongoing enigma, a collective desire to reach out to history. In that regard, her legacy continues to develop. She lies enveloped in crimson, the hue of existence and devotion, of vitality and renewal. Her face, previously concealed by a jade mask, now gazes at us through the lenses of science, art, and awe. She may not have a name, but her voice is heard. Enigmatic, yet remembered. The Red Queen might have governed a realm during her lifetime, yet in her passing, she commands something far more significant. Our creativity, Her tomb lay encased in stone, her tale unfolded quietly. Yet in some way, her voice emerges. Frida Kahlo was born on July 6, 1907, in the lively area of Coyoacán, which was a village at the time, located on the edges of Mexico City. The Casa Azul, her childhood home, brimmed with vibrancy, complexity, and a subtle resilience. It would eventually transform into a refuge, a site of conflict, and a tribute to one of the most legendary artists of the 20th century. Frida was the third of 4 daughters born to Guillermo Kahlo, a photographer with German-Hungarian roots, and Matilda Calderón, a devout Catholic with a blend of indigenous and Spanish heritage. Her parents were completely different from each other. Guillermo, introspective and thoughtful. Matilda, devout and emotionally detached. Frida would carry forward her father's deep reflection and creative vision, along with her mother's unwavering strength. In her youth, Frida was creative, vocal, and daring. She devoured books and posed inquiries that many grown-ups preferred to avoid. However, when she was 6 years old, she contracted polio, resulting in her right leg being thinner and weaker than the left. A physical difference she attempted to conceal with long skirts, yet it never constrained her spirit. The sickness confined her to bed for months, separating her from other kids. During this period, she developed a strong bond with her father, who motivated her to stay active, ride bikes, and keep her mind engaged. In contrast to many girls of her era, Frida had no desire to be a wife or a homemaker. What is her objective? To pursue a career in medicine. At the age of 15, she became one of the few girls to be accepted into the esteemed National Preparatory School in Mexico City. There, she stood out not only for her sharp intellect, but also for her bold humor, unconventional ideas, and distinctive fashion sense. She became part of a circle of youthful thinkers, referred to as the cachuchas, who engaged in discussions about philosophy, literature, and politics. Frida felt a strong attraction to revolution, to concepts that defied convention. Yet, even in those formative years, prior to the bus accident that would shape her physical form, and before the notoriety that would shape her legacy, Frida Kahlo was already immersing herself in the world through her art, with bold strokes, fearless concepts, and a sense of self that transcended the confines of others' expectations. She wasn't merely maturing in Coyoacán, she was getting ready to completely transform herself. On September 17, 1925, Frida Kahlo's existence was divided into 2 distinct parts: the girl she once was, and the woman she had to turn into. That afternoon, she hopped onto a wooden bus with her boyfriend, Alejandro Gomez Arias, right after school. They were chuckling, playfully poking fun at one another, and likely having a spirited debate. Frida always went all in. But moments later, the bus crashed into a streetcar, and in an instant, her future shattered into agony, twisted metal, and quietness. The accident was devastating. The streetcar slammed into the bus, pinning it against the wall, shattering wood, and sending passengers flying. Frida suffered a severe injury from an iron handrail. It penetrated her left hip and emerged through her pelvis. Her spinal column was fractured in 3 locations. Her right leg was broken beyond repair. Her foot was dislocated. Her collarbone and ribs were fractured. Her shoulder had come out of its socket. Her abdomen was punctured. At the age of just 18, she was still so young. A man draped her with a borrowed overcoat. Another person observed that her body was shimmering, not from blood, but from the golden powder she had been holding in a pouch. It had detonated upon contact, covering her shattered figure in what appeared to be sparkling remnants. Frida was brought to the Red Cross hospital, where she experienced multiple surgeries in the months that followed. She endured weeks in a body cast, lying flat on her back, unable to move, struggling with infection and uncertainty. Each day that went by, the vision she had of becoming a doctor faded more and more. Yet within that silence, a movement started to emerge. Her father gifted her brushes. Her mother crafted a unique easel to suspend above her bed. A mirror was positioned on the canopy for her to view her reflection. In that moment, confined by plaster and pain, Frida picked up her brush, initially to stave off boredom, but soon driven by an all-consuming passion. Her initial subjects were her own reflection, as she was all she possessed. However, what came to light was not vanity. It was about enduring. The accident shattered her physically, yet it also unlocked a passage into her own psyche, her own being, and ultimately, into the surreal dialect of suffering and self that would shape her artistry. The girl who aspired to mend others now started to mend herself, one brushstroke at a time. As Frida Kahlo lay surrounded by plaster and steel, a body struggling against itself with each breath, she started to paint. What began as a method of healing quickly evolved into a means of expression, and that expression was intensely personal, starkly truthful, and frequently difficult to confront. That was exactly the intention. Frida's art was not about charming blooms or genteel scenery. She expressed anguish through her brushstrokes, her suffering, body, feelings, and purpose. She began with self-portraits, not due to vanity, but because, as she famously expressed, "I paint myself because I am frequently alone, and because I am the subject I understand best." Her initial creations were modest in size, crafted on tin or wooden panels, influenced by Mexican retablos, which are devotional artworks designed to narrate tales of hardship and miracles. Frida reflected this tradition within herself. Her body transformed into the canvas. Her feelings transformed into the sacred space. She portrayed herself as divided, as wounded, like it's bleeding. In a single artwork, she is pierced by nails, resembling a contemporary martyr. In another scene, she drifts in a desolate terrain, connected to a fractured column, symbolizing her damaged spine. She depicted herself in tears, broken, headless, and exposed. Always active, constantly observing. Her suffering was raw and unfiltered. She depicted the harshness of trauma through beauty, resilience, and a touch of humor. Every piece represented a reclaiming of her body, her experiences, and her identity as a woman, in a world that frequently attempted to define her. Frida was sharing more than just her narrative. She was creating a unique form of visual storytelling, merging elements of Mexican folk art, surrealism, medical illustration, and symbolism. Her paintings transformed into surreal explorations of her inner self, encapsulated in hues, heritage, and legend. Once she regained the ability to walk, though it was with great discomfort, Frida had transformed from the girl who once aspired to be a doctor. She was a creator, and her creations were beyond anything anyone had ever encountered. She transformed the most challenging experience of her life into a wellspring of creativity. Frida Kahlo expressed more than just her suffering through her art. She captured the world's attention. In this way, she transformed pain into a holy form of personal expression. In 1928, while still in recovery and at the age of 21, Frida Kahlo encountered Diego Rivera, who would become the most significant and tumultuous figure in her life. He was 2 decades older than her, already the most renowned painter in Mexico. Imposing in both size and influence, Rivera stood as a monumental figure in Mexican muralism, celebrated for his expansive, politically infused frescoes that narrated the tale of the Mexican populace. Frida had encountered his work previously. She appreciated it. However, she was eager to hear his thoughts on her work. She presented her paintings to him at the Ministry of Education, breaking into his structured work to inquire directly, "Do I have talent?" Diego glanced and immediately agreed, and it wasn't merely out of goodwill. He saw in her something unique, a genuine voice, unrefined and sincere, brimming with anger, sarcasm, suffering, and grace. Their relationship unfolded with an intensity that matched their imaginative pursuits. Frida once remarked, "I experienced two significant events in my life, one where a streetcar struck me, and the other was Diego. In 1929, they tied the knot, an unusual match to those looking in from the outside. Diego, large, unfaithful, and politically renowned. Frida, with her biting wit, fiercely independent spirit, and already using a cane. Her parents referred to it as a union of strength and grace. Their connection was intense, yet tumultuous. Diego backed her artistic endeavors and fostered her development as a painter, yet he remained perpetually unfaithful, including with Frida's own sister, Cristina. Frida felt utterly heartbroken, and as a response, she sought out lovers of her own, both men and women, with whispers of affairs involving Leon Trotsky and painter Georgia O'Keeffe. They ended their marriage in 1930, only to reunite a year later under new conditions. This time, Frida would maintain her independence, her residence, her finances, her identity. Their second marriage focused more on a creative partnership and mutual understanding than on conventional love. Through all the betrayals and heartbreak, Diego stood as a steadfast presence in Frida's life. He pushed her boundaries. He hurt her. Yet he also had faith in her as an artist, as a trailblazer, and as a woman capable of transforming the essence of painting. United, they were not tranquil, but they were iconic. During the 1930s, Frida Kahlo accompanied Diego Rivera on a trip north to San Francisco, Detroit, and New York, while he worked on prominent mural commissions. Her time spent overseas confronted her with American industrialism, affluence, and the complexities of capitalism, leaving her with profound political unease. Frida embraced her identity as a Mexican nationalist, dedicated herself to communist ideals, and held a deep appreciation for indigenous traditions. The lavishness she observed in the United States, particularly during the time when the Great Depression devastated much of the nation, only intensified her feelings of disillusionment. In her correspondence, she ridiculed the society's fixation on material wealth and superficiality. She longed for the rawness, vibrancy, and complexity of Mexico. As Diego created vast murals on the walls of factories, Frida started to craft more intimate, subtle revolutions, producing deeply personal pieces on tin and canvas. Her style became distinct, cutting, dreamlike, heartfelt, and personal. During this period, she created some of her most memorable self-portraits. Frida painted herself for more than just vanity. She adorned herself to endure. Her identity transformed into her surroundings. In the wake of her accident, enduring persistent pain from numerous surgeries, and a heartbreaking failed pregnancy in Detroit, she began to reflect deeply within herself. Her portraits revealed her as wounded, shattered, laid bare. Her expression remained serene, unwavering, and unapologetic. One of her most impactful pieces, Henry Ford Hospital, depicts her reclining on a hospital bed, weeping, enveloped by ethereal representations of grief. A fetus, a snail, medical tools, a fractured pelvis. It was intense, vivid, and profoundly moving. A canvas that oozed with authenticity. Upon returning to Mexico, Frida fully engaged in leftist politics. She and Diego opened their home to Leon Trotsky during his time in exile. Frida donned Tijuana dresses, showcasing traditional indigenous attire. More than mere fashion, it serves as a political and cultural declaration. Her art was always intertwined with her beliefs. Her identity, her body, and her ideology were all intricately connected in her work. As Rivera created murals of revolution, Frida depicted its human toll, the fragmented body, the burning mind, and the self, perpetually reflecting. In her time of exile and suffering, she transformed into more than a mere painter of anguish. She emerged as a symbol of defiance through her art. Upon her return to Mexico in the late 1930s, Frida Kahlo had transformed beyond being merely Diego Rivera's wife. She had transformed into something completely different. A powerful presence, an artist whose creations exuded genuine truth, dreamlike imagery, and a strong sense of cultural heritage. In her native land, she embraced her true self completely. Her Casa Azul in Coyoacán transformed into a haven of vibrancy and paradox. Vibrant cobalt walls, cheerful yellow trim, Aztec sculptures adorning the garden, monkeys and parrots roaming freely. The home served as a vibrant manifestation of Frida's creativity. It was a fusion of heritage and defiance, sophistication and nature. In this space, she immersed herself in pre-Columbian artifacts, ex votos, folk art, and revolutionary literature. She donned vibrant Tijuana dresses, adorned her hair with flowers, and painted. While enveloped in the aroma of copal incense and the melodies of mariachi drifting in from the street outside. This era was characterized by a remarkable surge of innovation. Her paintings evolved into intricate works, rich in symbolism and infused with political themes. The two Fridas showcases a split identity, one adorned in European attire with a heart that bleeds, while the other stands resilient and dignified in indigenous garments. It was Frida's visual memoir, a depiction of affection, grief, and cultural legacy. In 1939, she showcased her creations in Paris, where renowned artists such as Picasso, Breton, and Kandinsky lauded her uniquely original approach. Yet even within the Surrealist movement, Frida was distinct. When André Breton attempted to categorize her as part of their group, she resisted. She mentioned that they believed I was a Surrealist, but that wasn't the case. I have never painted dreams. I created my own vision. She captured Mexico, not the idealized postcard image, but the vibrant, dynamic nation she cherished. Her work resonated with rich symbolism, featuring skeletons, hummingbirds, hearts, thorns, corn, and blood. She celebrated the indigenous heritage of her homeland, while revealing the brutality of its history and ongoing struggles. Yet, despite the strengthening of her artistic voice, her health kept deteriorating. Enduring numerous surgeries, battling infections, and facing chronic pain became part of everyday life. Despite everything, she continued to paint, supported in bed, her torso tightly laced in corsets, fingers gripping the brush firmly. Frida came back to Mexico not for relaxation, but to take back her strength through her art, her activism, and her bold acceptance of who she is. As the 1940s progressed, Frida Kahlo's body increasingly let her down. Her spine was weakening, her right leg was perpetually infected. Throughout her life, she faced over 30 surgeries, frequently enduring them in a challenging sequence. There were periods when she found herself confined to bed for months, surrounded by body casts or held in place by traction devices that pulled her bones apart. Yet, she continued to paint. Every canvas created during this time served as both an outlet and a form of defiance. Her creations became increasingly shadowy, more rebellious. She painted with a precision honed by suffering, unwilling to conceal herself in metaphor. In the broken column, she depicts herself as divided, her body impaled with nails, a fractured ionic column standing in for her spine. Her expression remains impassive, her eyes steady and unwavering. Pain for Frida transcended mere discussion. It was her partner, her rival, her inspiration. Her political voice became more prominent. She became a member of the Mexican Communist Party, participated in protests, penned passionate letters, and denounced imperialism and injustice. When her health prevented her from walking, she showed up at protests in a wheelchair, boldly holding signs and chanting slogans. In 1953, Frida had her first solo exhibition in Mexico, a long-awaited recognition of her artistry. However, her health was quite delicate, and the doctors advised her against attending. Thus, she acted in a manner that only Frida could. She was brought in by ambulance, transported on a stretcher, and positioned in the middle of the gallery on her hospital bed. Adorned in exquisite traditional attire, enveloped by her creations, she welcomed visitors with tequila, joy, and that unmistakable spark still alive in her gaze. Her last artworks were simultaneously innocent and deeply unsettling. In Marxism, Will Give Health to the Sick, she depicted herself adorned in a steel corset, embraced by the hands of Marx, discarding symbols of oppression. Her final piece was a still life featuring sliced watermelons, with one segment inscribed with the phrase, "Viva la vida," long live life. Even when confronted with death, she stood strong, filled with joy, and engaged in political discourse. Frida Kahlo's final portraits transcended mere self-portraits. They were revolutionary acts, infused with suffering, yet always marked by vitality. Frida Kahlo passed away on July 13, 1954, at the age of 47, in La Casa Azul, the very place of her birth, located in Coyoacán. The official explanation cited a pulmonary embolism, yet those who knew her well murmured about a more profound truth. She had been unwell, indeed, but also drained by suffering, by operations, by the prolonged battle with her own body. Only a few days prior, she had participated in a political demonstration opposing the CIA-backed coup in Guatemala. Despite her frailty and reliance on a wheelchair, she was determined to go, her fist raised defiantly in the air. Revolution was her last pulse. Her final diary entry was short, yet impactful. "I wish for a happy departure, and I desire never to come back." Frida's funeral took place at the Palacio de Bellas Artes, the most esteemed cultural venue in Mexico. Her body, adorned with the red flag of the Mexican Communist Party, was surrounded by friends, family, artists, and revolutionaries. Diego Rivera wore untröstlich. He referred to her as the greatest love of his life, despite the fact that his betrayals had almost shattered her. However, in the years that came after her passing, something remarkable took place. Frida Kahlo would not be erased. Initially, her name was murmured solely among art enthusiasts. Her creations defied easy classification, being too political for surrealists and too surreal for traditionalists. Yet gradually, her image, her narrative, and her resistance started to strike a chord. During the 1970s and 1980s, As feminist scholars and activists brought attention to overlooked voices, Frida's resonated more strongly. She had evolved beyond being merely a painter. She represented something greater. From suffering emerges elegance. From resistance, feminism emerges, celebrating Mexican identity unapologetically, exploring themes of identity, resilience, change, and genuine expression. Her face, with a unibrow and a captivating gaze, adorned with flowers in her hair, became iconic. Her residence transformed into a museum. Her diary transformed into a revered manuscript. Her paintings now adorn the walls of the world's most prestigious museums. Frida Kahlo spent a significant part of her life overshadowed by Diego. Yet in death, she advanced. She left more than just paintings behind. She abandoned a mirror, challenging us all to gaze into it, not with sympathy, not with apprehension, yet with flames. Frida Kahlo's image is omnipresent today, displayed on t-shirts, illustrated on murals, transformed into dolls, memes, posters, and symbols. Her distinctive unibrow, her hair adorned with flowers, her unwavering gaze, all immediately identifiable. What truly defines her legacy is not merely the recognition of her face. They acknowledge the reality that lies beneath it. Frida embraced her imperfections. She was not meant to be confined to categories. She defied the norm, and she was indifferent to being. In a world that seeks flawlessness, she offered authenticity. Unrefined, chaotic, lively, furious, exuberant, conflicting authenticity. She embraced what set her apart: her disability, her queerness, her politics, her culture, and transformed it into a masterpiece that crossed boundaries and eras. She has evolved into something beyond just an artist. She represents a worldwide emblem of rebellion, women's empowerment, cultural heritage, and artistic resilience. For queer communities, she stands as a bold bisexual figure who embraced her identity openly and without regret during an era that sought to enforce silence. For women, she serves as a testament that strength doesn't need approval. For artists with disabilities, she exemplifies how suffering can inspire creativity rather than hinder it. And for Mexico, she is a daughter restored, intense, rooted in tradition, and eternally woven into the fabric of the nation's spirit. Her paintings, previously regarded as overly unconventional or excessively intimate, are now celebrated as some of the most esteemed in the world. Artworks such as the two Fridas, self-portrait with thorn necklace and hummingbird, and the broken column resonate profoundly with those who have experienced pain and sought to transform that anguish into something meaningful. She resided in the periphery and transformed it into the spotlight. She welcomed paradox. A communist adorned in gold, a woman once betrayed who found love anew, a dismembered body housing an indomitable soul. Amidst everything, she created art not merely with hues, but with purpose. Frida Kahlo never sought to become an icon. She honestly shared her true self. In this way, they conveyed the reality for countless individuals who had never found their image represented in art prior to this moment. Now, when we look at her face, we see bravery. We perceive color. Resistance is evident. We perceive Frida, not absent, but eternal.